On this RodCast, we're going to pay homage to one of the great Donelsons in history, uh, the nephew of Andrew Jackson, who served as his uh, Secretary of State, Chief of Staff type role um, back in the presidency, and the husband of the great Emily Donelson. He was uh, asked to serve his father figure, if you will, Andrew Jackson, in the great exploration uh, and inception into the United States that happened in the state of Florida. He was the general uh, commanding officer, if you will, for Jackson on this unorthodox band of Tennesseans that went down on the orders of President Monroe to settle things in Florida and did a magnificent job, cutting the head off of really the English thumbprint almost immediately, as I've referred to in other broadcasts, by arresting some gun suppliers to the Native Americans and the Spanish, and then taking them to court where they were found guilty and hung or shot, and then turning around from their endeavor deeper into Florida when they heard that President Monroe was going to give a mulligan to the right-hand man of the king for fear that Britain or England would begin another campaign against the colonists in the United States, and rightfully so. But Jackson went back and took over the courtroom and found him guilty and overrode the judge's order, walked him out, and shot him. And that set the tone for the Donelson-Jackson campaign, if you will, in Florida, as they conquered it, and it became part of the United States. He became the Speaker of really Tennessee and Florida at that time to the President, and together they formed quite a team as they headed back to Nashville, Tennessee, and Hermitage. As they did, the band that they were with had grown, and they had become known as the new ideology forming in the United States called the Democratic Party. And Andrew Jackson Donelson was a significant part of the Democratic Party. He was born August the 25th, 1799, and died on June the 26th, 1871. He was nominated to be vice president in 1856 with a party called the Know Nothing Party, which was a branch of the Democratic Party. Going back to 1837, he was heavily active in Tennessee politics, as was Andrew Jackson, of course. And then in 1844, at the Democratic National Convention, just a year before President Jackson died, President Tyler appointed Andrew Jackson Donelson to the representatives of Texas in hopes that Governor Sam Houston would appoint him in charge of the annexation or the inception into the United States of Texas. He studied law at Transylvania University and served also as the minister to Prussia in 1846. He was significant in the Civil War for the Confederacy. He lost two sons in that war, and finally he succumbed to life and died at the Peabody Motel in 1871. One significant factor, as sort of a side note to the Donelson influence in politics and their lineage as far as Irish aristocrats who supported President Jackson so eloquently, is the fact that he had married a second wife after his first wife and first lady, Emily Donelson, had died. And his second wife was married to the grandson uh, of Thomas Jefferson, and uh, she was a widow too. And they got married and lived together until his death. So you had some influence there from the original Declaration of Independence that played a part in a lot of the philosophies that were developed by Andrew Jackson Donaldson. His time in Tennessee was spent as a representative, sort of forming what their role would be in the United States and helping to create the border with Sam Houston as far as the Mexican agreements for the state lines. And I think that that comes to play today in the modern world because of all the problems that we're having in immigration. We have 1,800 immigrants trying to come to the United States to this day. And I believe it's something that the United States needs to address more so from a Christian standpoint, more so from a morality standpoint, and more so to remember those lines that we created in those negotiations as we played our part in the extermination of the uh, natural North American natives in this country, and to try to show some respect as the Indians did when we pulled up in the Nina Pinta in Santa Maria. It's important for us not to lose our focus on who we are as Democrats. Uh, we are social supporters. We love to have all the ingredients that we can get in our party so that we can clearly look at things with many perspectives and come up with solutions that are like blanket solutions that will cover in a good way most of our issues that we face. The more opinions, the better. My opinion personally is that our government is off course. We're starting to become isolationist, and that's something that I think will not work well for us in our future. I see a world coming that is more governed by the United Nations, and I see it as a world where America can be the heartbeat of the world to represent so many different factions, so many different peoples. Figuring out that solution will fall, as everything else does, on good old-fashioned American ingenuity. We will figure it out as we go, like we always do. And I think that some of the solutions or some of the alternatives to the wall that Trump proposed should be something that creates education, that creates business, that is funded by the ones who have been suckling the longest, like the oil companies in Texas who are right there. I think that FIFA, World Soccer, should play a part in it. I think that the sports venues in America should play a part in it. And I think that we need to ask the United Nations, the Red Cross, FEMA, and other international efforts to help us on this endeavor. I do believe that welcome stadiums would be a great idea. I think that we need to revisit the NAFTA Act, take a look at expanding or pulling the population out of Mexico City, creating cities in the outlandish areas there, and trying to provide the simple things like we were accustomed to trying to achieve all those years ago in this country. Because we call them third world countries, and it means that they're running behind in things like manufacturing, things like textiles, and that we can focus on things like building railways and try to mimic what worked for us so well all those years ago. And at the same time, provide education and financial stability to a people who are struggling. And a lot of that struggle has to come from the deependista theory that we've all been uh, so focused on, as the United States government and a lot of the elite countries in the world have taken advantage through tariffs and taxes of migrant workers or work that's done overseas, where they're making pennies on the dollar that is nowhere in comparison to the American worker. And these solutions can help bridge the gap, which is what it's all about.